All right, I think we'll kick things off. Good to see you all coming in. Welcome everyone to this Research Notes seminar hosted by the Resources, Environment and Development Department, the REED department at the Crawford School at the ANU. So my name is Simon West and I'm a lecturer here with the REED department. And I'd like to open the seminar by acknowledging we're hosting the seminar on the sovereign and unceded lands of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples and pay my respects to elders past and present. In the context of today's seminar as well, I'd also like to acknowledge the authority and expertise of First Peoples across Australia on conservation and management of Australian landscapes too. So today we're very privileged and honoured to have with us Dr. Jasmine Pearson, who will present on understanding the diverse influences of private land conservation. And it's a particularly relevant and interesting, exciting topic at the moment as the Australian government steps up its efforts towards its international 30 by 30 goal to preserve 30% of the Australian landmass in protected areas by 2030. So really happy you could join us, Jasmine. So Jasmine's an environmental social scientist. Her work primarily focuses on how people value, relate to and connect with nature in different ways. Jasmine completed her PhD at the University of Queensland on the role of local and Indigenous knowledge in ecosystem-based management in Fiji. She's since worked as a postdoctoral researcher at Leuphana University in Germany, exploring human-nature relationships in Kilimanjaro, Tanzania. And Jasmine's currently a postdoctoral research fellow based at the Interdisciplinary Conservation or ICON Science Lab at RMIT University in Melbourne, where she's working on an AIC linkage project titled More Than a Reserve, measuring the benefits of private protected areas. So relating to the topic of today's talk. So the structure of the session is that Jasmine will talk for about 35 minutes or so, and then we'll open up for the final 25 minutes for questions and discussion. So just a reminder that we'll be recording Jasmine's presentation and we'll make it available online through the Crawford School's YouTube channel afterwards. But we'll edit out the Q&A section. And also just everyone, remember to keep your mics on mute during Jasmine's presentation. That'd be great. So warm welcome, Jasmine. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'll pass over to you for your presentation.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that introduction, Simon. If I can just, sorry, get my slides working. I would also like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung peoples of the Eastern Kulin Nations upon the unceded lands and waters on which I'm presenting today. And I'd also like to pay my deepest respects to elders, both past and present, and their ongoing connection to country. So, as Simon mentioned, this is an ARC linkage project. So it's quite an interdisciplinary project as well, with a diverse team of different researchers. These are the key research team members here on this slide. So we're coming from a range of different backgrounds, including social science, economics, ecology. We also have people involved who are very experienced in not just conservation science, but also conservation policy and practice as well. So the main aim of this More Than a Reserve project is really to understand and unpack the diversity of different influences that can be generated by private protected areas or PPAs in Australia. As part of this project, we are trying to develop a more holistic approach for understanding these influences. So looking at the different social, cultural, economic, and ecological dimensions as well. And the underlying motivation here is to really build a stronger evidence base on PPA benefits in general, beyond the well-documented biodiversity outcomes. So this is kind of how the project really started, was our project partners, who are conservation organizations in Australia. They have all of this really rich data and information on the ecological and natural science aspects of these PPAs and their impacts, but they don't have enough or as much evidence on the social side of things. So that's where we're kind of coming in to really support and help these partners to better communicate the benefits that are coming from the social side of things as well. And hopefully the outcomes and outputs of this project can really help our partners communicate these impacts to really try and attract more financial investment and different support from governments and philanthropic investors as well to really expand but also improve PPA networks in Australia. So private protected areas, or PPAs, are spatially defined areas that are designated using legal instruments to achieve the long-term protection of biodiversity under private governance. So they're essentially protected areas that are privately owned by different entities. They've recently become increasingly recognized as a vital conservation tool for extending the boundaries of public reserves and hence achieving more global and national biodiversity targets as well. So a lot of our, particularly in Australia, a lot of our native wildlife and biodiversity are living on these private properties. It has received less scholarly attention in comparison to some other types of protected areas, even though it is quite an old conservation strategy, so it's been around for a while, but there's just less research in this field. There's a range of different mechanisms and tools that are used to implement and manage PPA sites. One of the most well-known and popular mechanisms is called conservation covenants. It's also known as conservation easements in North America. And essentially, this is a legally binding agreement between the landholders and a government organization or a conservation agency, essentially to protect nature on their land in perpetuity. There's also a different range of diverse actors involved as well. So the PPAs can be owned and managed by not just individual landholders, but also that can be owned by NGOs, corporations, not-for-profits, research institutions, religious organizations, and so on. In addition to their environmental influences, there have been reported studies on benefits of PPAs for humans as well. For example, through delivering ecosystem services like carbon sequestration, erosion prevention, and soil maintenance as well. In addition to some of these positive influences, there are also some negative ones that have been identified in the literature. Mostly pertaining to negative perceptions of PPAs coming from communities. So there are a lot of situations where there are kind of land use conflicts, but also tensions with neighboring landholders who may have for example, a lot of the PPA sites are located in more agricultural and pastoral areas. And so some of the farmers have a bit more of a, I guess, anti-conservation mind, where they kind of see these sites as locking up land which could be used for agricultural and commercial purposes. But there can also be issues when it comes to restricted access to nature through these PPA sites, particularly in contexts where there are Indigenous and local communities who are restricted from accessing and caring for country on these sites as well. So there's a mix of different potential negative influences and challenges there. In a 2019 review on private land conservation, it was found that half of studies do not engage actors at all. And those ones that did mostly consider the private ones. So there's a lot of research looking at individual landholder perspectives, but not on a more diverse range of actors involved. So this really indicates that we do kind of need to expand a broader diversity of perspectives when it comes to understanding who and what is influenced by these PPA sites in different ways. We've also started working on our own systematic review on PPAs just to get a better sense of the literature that's already out there and all of the different reported influences by different studies. So we found studies emerging from 10 different countries across Africa, Oceania, Latin America, and North America as well. More than half of the studies were conducted in the US, which makes sense given the states have one of the largest PPA networks in the world. But it just shows that there needs to be more research done in other geographical contexts as well. Most of the studies have been only using quantitative approaches. There are some using mixed methods and qualitative studies as well. And unsurprisingly, it's mostly environmental influences being reported, but there are some on social and economic studies as well. And of these ones, only 15% take an interdisciplinary approach to assessing the outcomes of PPAs. Half of the studies reported positive influences only, but there were a mix of others that were kind of looking at identifying a mix of positive, negative, and neutral as well. So before I get into explaining the approach that we've been developing within this project, I kind of wanted to start off with just a couple of key definitions. We use the term entity and influence a lot in this project. So when we're talking about an entity, we're really referring to any living or non-living being that can be influenced by the PPA. So it could be a fauna or flora species, it could be humans individually or collectively. An entity could be an entire ecosystem, the atmosphere, and so on. So we've kind of left it intentionally open to allow for a range of perspectives on what an entity could be and how it can be influenced by the PPA in different ways. So we wanted to also be more inclusive of different perceptions and conceptualizations of nature. And then when we refer to an influence, this is essentially any positive, negative, or neutral impact that a PPA can have on any given entity. And just as a very simple example here, I've kind of put a bird as an entity that can be positively influenced by a PPA through habitat provision. So in this example, the influence is providing habitat for the bird. This is a figure that's been created by an amazing graphic designer of ours, which has been included in a paper which is currently under review. But essentially what this is illustrating is a hypothetical PPA scenario, trying to kind of highlight the different positive, negative, and neutral influences that PPA can have on a range of different human and non-human entities. So just as some examples, we've got some non-humans there, like species, ecosystems. This is intentionally very broad. But then we also have a range of human entities there as well. Researchers, farmers, First Nations people, and so on. We've captured or tried to illustrate some of the positive influences that can come out of these PPAs, including habitat provision and connectivity, but also things like recreation for tourists and visitors and other people involved. And then we also wanted to highlight some of the potential negative influences as well. So we've got land use conflict, which I mentioned before, and then we've also got predation, which in this scenario is pointing out from the bird who's been eating the crops of the neighboring farmers and causing some tension there. And we also kind of wanted to include neutral influences as well, just to kind of create space for any other influences that are not necessarily categorized as positive or negative, just to account for any kind of, neutral impacts on some of the entities as well. And I guess the kind of another key thing that we really wanted to demonstrate with this figure is that you can see the border of the PPA is kind of in this black dotted line. And we really wanted to show that these influences of the PPA don't stop within the border. They also have these flow-on effects, or also known as spillover effects, that can really kind of flow from the PPA site to the neighbouring ecosystems and land use types as well. And we've even, you can kind of see in the back corner, we've also included like a distant city to really emphasize this, because when you have researchers, for example, coming in, collecting data, they're gaining knowledge, they're learning, that's a positive influence, and then they're kind of taking that back home to their research institution or university, and then sharing that information with others as well. So these influences can go a really long way. So to apply our approach that we're developing, we are collecting and analysing data from multiple PPA case study sites from our partner organisations listed here. So we're working with BirdLife Australia, Trust for Nature, Bush Heritage Australia, and the Australian Land Conservation Alliance. And each of these organisations have a really strong role to play in the implementation of PPAs in Australia. So now I wanted to give you a bit of an overview of the case study sites that we're looking at. So the first one is Glue Reserve, which is located in South Australia. I've just got some example photos of there, some of the non-human entities on the site. But this one is privately owned and managed by BirdLife. It's a very ecologically diverse and significant area. There's a range of different management techniques taking place, including different fire regimes. There's also diversity of actors involved. So they do have a tourism aspect to the site. So people can come and camp on the grounds. They can participate in different recreational activities, mostly bird watching. It does attract a lot of hardcore birders because there are a lot of rare and threatened bird species at Blue Pot, many of which are endemic as well. So we've got a mix of different actors there as well. We also have there's a research station there. So there are mostly ecological researchers and natural scientists coming to do research on the site. And then we've also got quite a strong network of volunteers and local contractors as well. Next case study site is Scottsdale Reserve, which is located in New South Wales. It's actually only a 45-minute drive outside of Canberra. So you can go visit it if you like, but you do have to let the reserve managers know in advance because it is a private property. But they're usually very happy to kind of give people informal tours of the reserve and talk a little bit about the work that they're doing there. So this one is owned and managed by Bush Heritage. There's grassy box woodlands and temperate grasslands, and there's various management techniques, including revegetation, as well as weed and feral animal control. And there's a big volunteering effort here because a lot of these lands on the PPA site have been really severely impacted by bushfires in the past. So there's like huge effort in trying to restore some of those ecosystems there. And these are just some more photos that I took of the reserve a few weeks ago when we did a bit of a site visit. Just really beautiful. So this is the third and final case study site. It's called State Reserve in Victoria. This one is owned and managed by Trust for Nature. There's a range of hundreds of different plant and animal species, 8 different habitat types, and again, a lot of revegetation, weed and animal control happening. There is a management committee there, kind of responsible for managing the site. There's a range of volunteers. And there are visitors too. They don't have campgrounds for people to come and visit like with Glue Pot, but people are allowed to come and visit during the day. So we are in the midst of the first phase of fieldwork for this project at the moment. So we're doing a series of focus group discussions to start off with the project partners. So doing 3 focus groups, 1 per case study site. And so for this initial phase, we're really interested in talking to people directly involved in the governance and management of the PPA case study sites, and just getting their initial perspective on what's happening with these sites. So the two main aims are, one, to first of all understand PPA manager perspectives on what and who is influenced by the PPA, and also how they're influenced. And then the second main aim here is to really identify the key actors and entities for our next phases of fieldwork. So because this is a linkage project, we work quite closely with our partners. And so they've been had a really crucial role in kind of supporting us and helping us to kind of, you know, guide the fieldwork and the project in a way that is actually going to be beneficial to them as well and support their endeavors. So this is just from the photo from the Glutebot focus group discussion. So we've done 2 focus groups so far. We've got 1 left to go. It's been roughly 5 to 6 people for each one, and we've conducted a series of participatory activities during each focus group. So we've had 3 activities. The first one focused on what and who is influenced by the PPA. So this was all about identifying the relevant human and non-human entities. And so we got participants to kind of map this out on just butcher's paper and post-it notes and pens. And then the second activity was really unpacking how these entities are influenced. And so we had different color-coded post-it notes for the positive, negative, and neutral influences as well. And then the third and final activity was really focusing on which entities we should focus on for the project. So while the first 2 activities were really about kind of getting people to think outside the box a little bit, broadly about all of the potential influences and entities that this PPA might be having. And then narrowing it down in the third activity to really look at where we should kind of focus on in terms of which entities are less understood. So which ones do they have less data and knowledge on, but are also really interesting and important for them to understand. And so after the focus groups, I've then transcribed them and imported them into NVivo, where I've just been analyzing using content analysis to really identify the key themes in terms of the influences and entities. And this is just some photos from some of the activities. This was at Scottsdale. And you can see the chaos here for the different post-it notes. The one on the left was just the first exercise. So this was just identifying all of the different entities. So you can see there's a lot of information that was coming out of there. And the second one is from the second activity, which was identifying the influences as well, connecting them to the entities. So you can see, again, the entities are in the yellow post-it notes, and then we have, I think pink is all the positive influences, blue, I believe, is neutral, and orange was negative. I don't expect you to be able to read any of that, but just kind of wanted to show you a little bit about what we were doing and the type of or the extent of information that was coming out of these discussions. So these are some preliminary results. I've just been kind of playing around with things and in vivo, so this is just kind of how I've organized it for now. But you can see in the center, you've got the PPA, which in this case is Glutepot Reserve, and then the purple boxes are the entities or the entity groups. The green boxes are the positive influences, and the red boxes are the negative influences. In this case, there was no neutral influences identified. So I won't go through all of them, but just to kind of touch on some, we had a range of different entities, including volunteers, the tourism actors, First Peoples, future generations, donors, neighbours. Fire was an entity that came out, which I thought was quite interesting as well. And just looking at some of the positive influences, you can see in the left-hand corner, the ones coming out from the volunteers, there was a lot of benefits identified there. So the PPA managers were talking about how by participating in these conservation activities on the PPA, volunteers were gaining new knowledge and skills, also gaining a sense of pride and belonging by contributing to something and feeling like they're a part of something really important by participating in these conservation activities, which was also contributing to their identity as well. They're coming in as more conservation-minded people, and they're also getting benefits in terms of social cohesion, building relationships with people, making friendships, and so on. So there are all these benefits, yeah, coming out from volunteers, which is why they were identified as a key actor group for us to focus on in the next stage of fieldwork. Just touching on one of the negative influences as well. So they also talked about neighbours, so the different neighbouring landholders to the PPA site. And there's a mix of positive and negative impacts there. So they mentioned threat abatement. So this was in the context of fire management. So because of the fire management strategies taking place at the PPA site, they identified that this was also having a positive influence on the neighbours by reducing bushfire risk in the area. However, they did mention that quite a few of the neighbouring landholders do have a negative perception of the PPA site. This is kind of similar to what has been identified in the literature and also was a theme of the Scottsdale Reserve as well, where there were like farmers living nearby that kind of had this negative perception of conservation in general. And the PPA managers kind of specified that they thought that because there's a fence that they implemented around the PPA, they thought that some of the neighbours weren't happy with this because it was restricting access for their livestock for grazing. So that was one of the negative influences that they identified. This is an even more chaotic figure. This is also just something that I've been playing around with in vivo, so it's not anything that's going to be included in a publication, but just wanted to share this with you through the analysis process. I've just kind of linked here the key entity groups to different subgroups of entities. So obviously, I won't go through all of them, but we've got the non-human ones there. We've got researchers, we've got volunteers, and we've got a breakdown of different entity subgroups. So just focusing on the volunteer ones, for example, there's a range of different volunteer types at Gloucester Reserve. So there's the management committee, but there's also the rangers, there's the assistant rangers, there's the fire team, there's the field naturalists. So there's lots of different volunteers involved. And of course, with this project, unfortunately, we can't speak to everyone. So we won't be able to capture everyone's perspectives. But this is why the kind of third and final activity I mentioned is so vital for kind of, helping us to narrow down and work out where to start with capturing these different perspectives. So we are moving on to phase 2 fieldwork. So the next phase is focusing on volunteers. So we're planning on conducting a series of semi-structured interviews and potentially photo elicitation as well with volunteers at Blue Pot Reserve. The management committee kindly invited us to their end of year event next month in mid-November. So basically every year they kind of have this event where all the volunteers are involved, and they've invited us to speak. So I'll probably give a similar presentation to today to just give them an update on the project and where we're at, but also it will give us a chance to actually interview some of the volunteers and to gain an understanding of the influence that the PPA is having on them or has had on them. And I've broken this down into a few different key research questions. So first of all, what are the influences of PPA on volunteers? And to what extent are those influences reciprocal? This was something that was has come up quite a lot in the project, because while our initial aim is to focus on influences coming out of the PPA, there has been quite a focus on the influences coming into the PPA as well. So how are the different human and non-human entities influencing the PPA? So we wanted to create space here for volunteers and other actors as well to kind of express that reciprocity in the influences. So the second research question is, how do these influences align with the motivations behind volunteers' participation in PPA conservation? Here we kind of wanted to unpack a little bit further whether the original motivations to get involved in this volunteering, I guess, met the actual benefits that people got out of it. Did it meet their expectations? Did it exceed their expectations or not? So that would be quite interesting to explore a little bit further. The third research question there is, what are the perceptions, relationships, and values of nature underpinning these influences? So here I kind of wanted to first understand how the participants actually perceive and define nature, starting off with, but also how they perceive their own relationship to nature. So really unpacking that kind of ontological perspectives on what nature is and their relationship to it, and whether they feel connected or not. And yeah, I also just wanted to unpack the kind of broad values of nature and how that might influence their perceived influences of the PPA as well. And finally, the last question is, what are the key factors affecting how and to what extent the volunteers are influenced by the PPA? So this is also just looking at other things like, for example, how long the participant has been volunteering in the PPA site, how often they're going, are they going alone, are they going with friends? These are all kind of things that can also influence the way they're being impacted as well. So that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for listening, and sorry that I can't share more results. As I kind of mentioned, we are in this still kind of in the first phase of fieldwork, so these results are all very preliminary, but I'm happy to answer any questions, and also to get feedback as well if you have any ideas on how we can kind of improve the project in different ways. So thank you very much.